Hi everyone, welcome back for another episode of STEM Sundays with Emily. As promised, we have another surprise activity today, and I think you're going to like this one a lot. So today we're going to be building moon sand, which I think has become pretty popular over the years. It's not something that I was really ever familiar with as a kid, but I know from my cousins and their children that moon sand has become pretty popular, just like slime. So this somehow goes together with the past activities. I figured the last few activities have been relating to the weather and the earth and climate, so I figured this was similar but just happening on the moon instead. So we're going to pretend that they're related a little bit, and they are in a sense, but I just thought moon sand would be a fun activity to follow up after our rainbow activity from St. Patrick's Day. So as you can see, just a few materials needed today, and I think most of them you're just going to have around your house. Probably this one more than any of the other activities. I had all of these sitting in my pantry, so if I have them, you probably have them too. So first, we're gonna need some flour. Next, some oil. I just have canola oil. You could also use baby oil. You could probably use any other activities, but when researching how to make moon sand, canola oil and baby oil were the two that were recommended, so I had canola oil in my pantry, so that's what I have here today. Next, we're going to need a mixing bowl and some sort of mixing utensil. I have this spoon and just a plastic bowl. Depending on how much moon sand you make, you might need a bigger bowl or a smaller bowl, but I thought this was a pretty average size bowl to use for the activity today. Next, just a measuring cup. We're going to need to measure out a few quantities of the flour and the oil, so just a measuring cup. You don't have to be too accurate, but as an engineer, I always like to be as accurate as possible. And lastly, you're just going to need some sort of container to put the moon sand in after. So you could probably use your bowl if you wanted, but some of the activities that you can do after the moon sand I thought worked better with a flat surface, so I actually used a lid, the top to one of my shoe boxes. You could probably use the shoebox as a whole, but for videoing purposes, it's easier for you to see with a shorter lid on the top here. So that's why I went with the shoebox top. Feel free to use a shoebox or any other type of container. So those are the materials. Again, most of them probably already at your house. And let's get into making the moon sand then. So I'm going to move some of these out of the way. We're going to need pretty much all these except for the lid for the moment. So I saw when researching this activity again that you can make large quantities, small quantities, and I decided to go with somewhat of a smaller quantity for the video, but again, feel free to use this formula for moving forward if you want to make more or less. So we're going to be using 2 cups of flour and 1/4 cup of oil. So it's, I believe, a 1:8 ratio, so you're gonna have 8 times the amount of flour than you are the oil. So if you wanted to round it up easier in your head, it would be 8 cups of flour to 1 cup of oil. I'm gonna be scaling it back a little bit today to use 2 cups of flour and 1/4 cup of oil, same ratio, but just on a smaller scale. So let's get some of this measured out. Okay, I'm gonna use my measuring cup. You can see I put this in the microwave probably one too many times, so it is a little cloudy on the bottom, but works perfectly good for this activity today. We're going to need 2 cups, if you can see, of flour. So I'm gonna put it in my bowl just in case I have some spillage. It's all contained. I'm just going to use my giant spoon that we'll use to mix it to scoop it out. So like I said, I never did this activity as a child, but when looking through different STEM activities to do for this YouTube series, this one I just thought was really fun and came well recommended by from students, from teachers, from parents, and I thought that there were a lot of different ways you could use it in the future, and even once you make it. There's a lot of different ways you can use it and have fun with it, and kids just really seem to enjoy it. So that's why I decided to do the moon sand today. We're almost there, probably a couple more spoonfuls. And once we get the moon sand created, I'll give you some ideas of how you can use it and things, again, from around your house you can use that should entertain your students or your children. I'm just gonna do one more small spoonful, perfect. Okay, so I have my 2 cups of flour. Dump that in, perfect. And then, all done with this, I'm just gonna move it to the side. Oh, I did make a little spill. Oops. Next, we have oil. So we have 2 cups of flour and now 1/4 cup of oil. So I'm gonna turn this around so I can see it clearly. There we go. So not that much oil in comparison. This is a good lesson in ratios if you haven't learned about those yet or want to teach your children or students a little bit about how ratios work, fractions. Simple, easy idea. So we're all done with the oil and all done with our measuring cup. I'm just going to put it to the side. And now we can just mix it up. So this, if you have a big enough bowl, should be easy for students of all ages to do. You know, you don't want to have too small a bowl. Ooh, I think I just flung some. You don't want to have too small a bowl that it's hard for somebody to stir up, but we do want to mix this all together. And it is going to be a little bit tricky to combine everything. You might want to use a potato masher or something with some prongs. That might be easier to mix because as you can see, let me show you, when you're mixing, it's kind of like, if you've ever made pie crust a little bit, it's hard to mix the oil and it's gonna clump up into these little balls of oil. So you kind of wanna mash the clumps of oil that form into the rest of the flour. So it's going to take a little mixing, which is gonna be fun for a younger student or a younger child to mix in, but not too bad. As you can see, mine are already becoming like pea-size shaped, and we just want to mix that all in so that we can use all of our flour for the moon sand. So as we're mixing, I'll tell you a little bit about the activities that we're going to be able to do with this moon sand. I'm actually not going to demonstrate many of them today, but I wanted to give you guys some ideas because I really think there are lots of opportunities for what you can do with the moon sand once it's created. So one activity is to use, going along with the space theme of being a moon sand, is you can create different sized craters. So once we get our moon sand mixed up, we're going to dump it into whatever container that you have. I have the shoebox top today, but whether you use a shoebox top or anything else, spread it out into somewhat of an even surface, and then go around your house and find different sized objects. They could be, a bouncy ball or some sort of toy or figurine, something, okay, being dropped from a decent height, and drop that into the moon sand and see what kind of shape forms, what kind of crater forms. So that's just one activity, and you can see from different heights dropping it, different sized objects, even if you throw it from the side, like a crater or an asteroid, would hit the moon or even the Earth's surface. It's just a great activity in learning about different types of space objects, meteors, asteroids, and what kind of damage they can create to planets, and in this case, the moon specifically. So I think I've mixed up our moon sand pretty good here. I'll show you guys. It's definitely fine little clumps if there are any left. So this is what it should look like once you're all set. Let me put my spoon down. So here's what it'll look like when it's all set. Let me get my spoon and show you guys. So that should be what we're looking for by the time we're done mixing. So as you can see, it didn't take that long, but it does take some effort to get it mixed up just quite right. So now that we have this, I'm going to take my shoebox lid, if you guys can see, and I'm just going to pour it in. Now another idea that I saw which might be fun to kind of customize your moon sand is if you wanted to add different colors or glitter or just something to kind of make your moon sand fun and a little bit creative. I thought about using the food coloring, but I didn't want to dye my hands. I'm not sure if that's with all food coloring, but the food coloring I got for last week's activity did leave my hands red for a day or two, so it might be a good idea to do like a natural dye to the moon sand, but just fun way to kind of personalize it if you wanted to do it at home with your children or as part of a school project. So I'm gonna just smooth this out a little bit. And here we go. So now we have our moon sand here. And because these are, you know, natural ingredients, you can play around with it. Shouldn't get your hands too sticky, but it might not be a bad idea to have some napkins around just if kids want to wipe their hands off in between activities. But like I said, one of the great activities you could do with this is learn about craters. That would be just dropping something from different heights, seeing what kind of shape it creates in the moon sand. Another idea would just be using some vehicles, going back to kind of my career field, using vehicles in different mini cars or whatever you might have at home to see how they move through the moon sand and what kind of shapes you can create and what tire tracks each car leaves. And another activity going back to the space theme, because I think that goes well with calling this moon sand. It might be hard for a child to think about cars being on the moon, but another idea to being out in space is just seeing what this moon sand is feeling like. If you wanted to create different valleys or mountains, you could do that. And depending on how adventurous you are, it might be cool to introduce some type of liquid, see how that affects the moon sand. I didn't get to try that at home, but it was one activity that I saw. I would definitely save it for the end. If you're going to do that, probably don't start with adding any liquid or other materials to this. But just some fun ideas that you can do using moon sand. Again, this is a very easy thing to create and something that you could probably keep around for a decent amount of time. So not one of these things that once you use it, it's done forever. But even if you were to do that one-time thing, again, it takes less than 10 minutes to make this if you wanted to do it another time. So this is moon sand, very easy to create, and I'm excited to see what you learn using this moon sand and what kind of lessons you can teach. I'd really recommend the crater idea. I wish I had brought something to drop in so you could see what I meant, but just taking different objects from around your house, dropping them into the moon sand, or throwing them from the side just to see what kind of damage and what that looks like. Talking about craters created by asteroids, meteors, meteorites, all of those different types of space objects. So next week, not a surprise, it is the last week of March already. We're going to be doing snap circuits again. So get your snap circuit kits ready, and we're going to do 2 more activities using the snap circuits. So I'll see you guys next week with snap circuits, and in the meantime, enjoy your moon sand. All right, bye guys.